very pleased to have join us from The Athletic live in studio for the second time in a row, Eric Duhatschek. How are you?
I'm okay. I just got back from Edmonton.
And boy, I was going to say, okay. You're going to do the weight. Your arms are tired?
I drove.
You drove? Yeah. What was second prize?
No, exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Good. Well, you got to get that out of the way first.
Oh,
right?
You do.
Well, but I will say this. I thought the hockey was pretty compelling. Like I really well, I thought so. I mean, I guess everybody's. What are people focused on? It seems to me that the people are focused on Toronto, Tampa, the Rangers, Jersey, and I've been kind of following Edmonton, Los Angeles, and on the off days, Seattle, Colorado, and I've found both series to be very, very interesting. Los Angeles is flat out a better team than they were a year ago. They have better goaltending, they have better defense, and I don't know if they're going to get Kevin Fiala back, but I would really like to see them get Kevin Fiala back because he was a real X factor for them this year. I thought the way Todd McClellan deployed him as kind of a third line guy, 5-on-5, really gave them three effective forward lines, and then he was a catalyst on the power play. Now, King's power play has been pretty good in the series so far, but I like the way they've played this rope-a-dope, bend but don't break style. Yeah. And I mean, it just feels like another one of those series that could go down to the wire. And so, yeah, I thought I'll go back for Game 5, and then we'll see where we're at.
Did the Oilers escape with a split?
Well, I thought they were the better team in both games.
Okay,
but it for sure in that first game, LA didn't have anything going early, and then all of a sudden chip away, and then conjure something up in overtime on the power play. But the second game, when you're sitting there, of course, we write columns on deadline, so it's 2-0 Edmonton, and at that point it looks like, okay, a year ago 4-3 in the opener, same script. This year it's 2-0. Could 2-0 become 6-0, which is what happened in Game 2 last year. Yeah. And you're leaning towards same script, and then it's suddenly 2-2, and that second goal by Velarde on Skinner was not great. And now in the second intermission, you're writing the other side of it, which is, wow, can you imagine Edmonton going down 2-0, heading back to California, and the questions that will be asked? And then they got that a very important early goal from a depth guy, which is a big difference on this team. Yep. And then I thought after that they showed a lot of poise to lock it down. So, but again, to me, ebbs and flows are what playoffs are all about. And I just like the way Los Angeles there's a maturity about their game that they don't get flustered and they don't start running around it. The little bit that I've looked in on the other series, there is a little bit of that running around, that little bit of that playing like chickens with their heads cut off, and I don't see that in the two series I've been monitoring. I thought there was a lot of poise on display in Seattle, Colorado too. Good, fast, go hockey, like really good hitting. Like Yanni Gourde again is proving that this is a playoff player to be reckoned with, and just really interesting to watch from a perspective of someone that watches hockey for a living.
The Oilers, lot was made about the additions and the changes. Skinner's come in and been fine as a rookie goaltender. Yeah. You mentioned like Costin got the goal, or Costin. Do you see the little things now, Eric? I mean, this was a team that we knew could score. They'd score themselves out of trouble. Yeah. But do you see the little details in the game there that maybe they haven't had before?
I would say that's true. But I think that it's two things. One, I just think they're flat out better in terms of talent.
Yes.
So if you look at their 1 to 5 forwards, I don't think Kane has had a great series so far, but he was tremendous in last year's playoffs, and I think he's somebody that can raise the level of his play again. And Nugent Hopkins had the best year of his career. Hyman had the best year of his career. McDavid had the best year of his career. I mean, I don't think anybody has a better 1 to 5 forward group than Edmonton does. And then I think that that selectively the players that they've got filling those 6 to 11, because they're playing 11 forwards again after the injury to Janmark, are just flat out better. Like I like Nick Bukestad, that third line center matchup. It looks like Lizotte is out tonight for Los Angeles, but you've got a 6-6 guy against a 5-6 guy. I mean, that's hard. That's hard on a team like Los Angeles. And I like the way Bukestad carries himself. We'd had a good conversation in the dressing room the other day. And then, lots of people have said this, but Ekholm does make a difference. He's just one of those guys that leads from the way his presence on the team, his presence on the bench, his presence in the dressing room. He's just a guy that knows how to play the game efficiently, physically. I think he was a real catalyst in that 14-0-1 run at the end of the season. To me, actually, the one thing about Edmonton at the trade deadline that I wondered about was Evan Bouchard ready to step in as PP quarterback one, because in order to make the Ekholm trade, they moved out Tyson Barrie. And so Tyson Barrie, excellent power play guy, sheltered minutes on the third pair, but not bad this year. If you talk to everybody, to the people in Edmonton that saw them play night in and night out, they will tell you that Barrie had a very good year. So that is that I can't ever remember somebody, taking a power play that was on its way to being like a historic greatest power play of all time, and then changing it in the middle of a season, and it hasn't missed a beat. So that to me was important, that Bouchard had developed enough maturity and experience to step in, and he has been, I think, as effective as Barrie. And lots of what works on that power play is, the play down low, that cross seam pass from McDavid to Draisaitl for the one timer. But so you haven't hurt yourself by subtracting Barrie, but you've really improved yourself by adding Ekholm, and that to me is, I think, why a lot of people thought that Edmonton had a chance to come out of the conference, and they do. They when you think about a 1-1 split and Connor McDavid has just a single assist in the game, he's obviously got another level that he can get to, and when he gets to that level, which he will, it could be interesting.
So what does LA hang its hat on going home? Because you're absolutely right. You're not going to keep McDavid, under wraps like that. Yeah. I mean, how old is Kopitar, by the way?
1,000,000 years old. But he doesn't play that way,
no.
Right? I guess that's the point you're making. He's not playing that way.
He's timeless right now.
I think he's been rejuvenated. And, and again, I've been around Los Angeles lots in the last few years, and I just felt that when they were in the sort of the early stages of that rebuild, he's a great professional. He's the son of a coach. Daryl Sutter will tell you it's probably the best center that he's ever had. But I think it's hard to be good for 82 games when you probably don't have much of a chance to play in the playoffs. So I think what's happened in the last couple of years, as they've turned the corner and supplemented that lineup with good pros like Fiala and like Victor Arvidsson, and the development of Trevor Moore, and signing Philip Deneau. Now he's got some help. It's not just him anymore, and he just looks like a guy who's got a second wind in his career. You were asking, what do you hang your hat on? Well, you hang your hat on the fact that Deneau doesn't get intimidated by playing against Draisaitl and McDavid, that Kopitar doesn't get intimidated by playing against those guys. They're in the Selke conversation most years for a reason, and there's very few teams that can roll out two guys that can produce offensively, especially Kopitar, and still get the job done defensively. And Deneau, he spoke a couple of times in the last couple of days, and there's a pleasing cockiness to him. I like him. He's I like him a lot because he's played a long time and he's had some success, and he doesn't get worried or flustered by some nights when it doesn't kind of go their way, because Draisaitl has been outstanding for Edmonton. He's just been really, really good. But those two guys, I think they have their own Ekholm in Gavrikov, who's been a very effective player, actually better in the playoffs than in the regular season. There were moments in the regular season when it was, what about him? And then one of the focal points, of course, in the series is Mikey Anderson. So you have to be a pretty hardcore hockey fan to know very much about who is Mikey Anderson. That was one of my questions for Todd McLellan. I said, how and when did this guy become such a good player? And his answer was simply, he said, well, we've known he's been a good player for a long period of time, but the rest of the league is just catching up. But one of the things about a guy like Anderson, who again carries himself with a lot of confidence, and that's Joey Anderson's brother, who's probably more well known, but not as good a player. playing with Drew Doughty can be a challenge. It can be a challenge, you know, because sometimes you have to kind of clean up the messes that Doughty makes, and Doughty likes the puck on his stick, and he likes to go, and so it takes a special skill set and personality, I would say, to play effectively with Drew Doughty, and they are an excellent pair together. And they burn up 25 minutes per night. So, you know, we're always talking about, you know, the most underrated this, the most underrated that. I think if you were to put together a list of the 10 most underrated defensemen, the ones that really fly under the radar, because I think, you know, Ekholm would be on that list, but he doesn't really fly under the radar. I think everyone knows he was a great number 2 in Nashville, but Mikey Anderson for sure would be on that list. You know, he's just one of those guys that efficiently gets the job done. You know, I never, you know, I mean, it's not Nicholas Lidstrom, but you know, when you think about the things that Nicholas Lidstrom brought to the mix to become one of the greatest players of all time, it was those understated things, just being in the right position, just making it look effortless, right? That's hard to do. It's hard to make it look effortless. But you can, but the really efficient players are the ones that make it look effortless. Just knowing you need to be here rather than there, and that's my impression of Mikey Anderson. At some point, I'll probably write about him, but you know, they have a mature team, and I think the goaltender has fit in very well. That was another conversation I had with the coach there, Todd McClellan, because Todd's been around forever too. And I said, you know yourself, the long history of National Hockey League trades is that there's very few times when a team has traded for a goalie at or near the deadline, grafted him onto the roster, and had it worked out. And I said, you know, in your experience, you know, has that ever happened? And he said, well, not in my NHL experience. And he suggested that the closest that ever happened was when Detroit had Dominic Hasek that year that they won, I think in 2008, but Hasek got hurt and they ended up having to rely on Chris Osgood, and Osgood came through for them too. And his point was that you often need two. And he is, whenever people ask about Korpisalo, he always brings up Phoenix Copley as a guy that helped save their season because they weren't getting it done from the other two guys that they started the year with. But Korpisalo, you know, he's a confident guy. And you know, has played for a really bad team for a long period of time. And sometimes guys are just, you know, good bad team goalies and they go to a good team and they can't get it done. But Korpisalo looks like a guy who's really enjoying playing for a team with structure. And and I wouldn't be
you don't say.
Well, if you're a goaltender, you probably do like structure in front of you. Look at what Carolina has and how Carolina has turned, you know, sometimes average goaltending into wins in the standings and very good numbers for the various goaltenders that have patrolled the crease there. So, you know, I mean, that's an off-season question, but Korpisalo is UFA after this year. LA needs a new number one goaltender. You know, if this works out, you know, and they can figure out the numbers, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he becomes the goaltender of the future for this next generation of Kings players that are coming through the pipeline.
I want to skip over to the East for a second and come back to the West. And the reason I want to go to the East, I started the show with this. It's easy in this job to get caught up in tropes and, you know, history, and this happened, so that must happen. But boy, that Rangers jersey series sure looks like one team needs to learn how to lose and one team took the lessons from losing and fixed their problems.
Yeah, 100%, Robin. And when I did my preview for The Athletic, I do a thing where I interview a coach, a manager, and a scout, and just get their takes on things. And in every one of those interviews that I did, that was my starting point when it came to the New Jersey Rangers series. The thrust of my question was that, you know, the Rangers last year were that young up and coming team that had made those great strides and didn't seem ready to win. And to be honest with you, I thought they were going out in the first round. And so the fact that they won as much as they did last year surprised me.
Sure.
So, you know, give them credit because
that was goalie too, though, right?
Oh yeah. But I was not expecting to see them do as well as they did last year. But yes, so they did gain a lot of valuable experience last year. And, you know, they added Patrick Kane and Vladimir Tarasenko.
What they needed, right?
So you've got, you know, you've got experience, like playoff experience, championship experience, you know, guys who, Patrick Kane has said it multiple times in the last little while as he's been interviewed that, he's been kind of rejuvenated by going to a team that had a chance to win after, muddling through those lean years in Chicago the last little while. And just in the same way, New Jersey went a 47-point year-over-year increase. You have to applaud everything that went right there. They got the right goaltender. Washington cast off 2 goaltenders. Both of them are still playing. Washington isn't playing. Dougie Hamilton had a poor year last year, but he had a much better year this year. So, the money they invested in him as a free agent is proving to now be worth it. They went out and very aggressively brought in Timo Meier because they were small and they felt that they needed more, someone who has skill but also has some size and can push back a little. It hasn't, I don't think, been quite the marriage made in heaven yet. It's been a little bit more of an adjustment for him than I think maybe he and the team thought. But they have a really good team that looks young, and needs to gain a little bit of experience, and are probably doing it right now. So in my mind, the Rangers are going to get through fairly easily. And I thought that ahead of time, but 2 of my 3 experts picked New Jersey. And I thought, wow, okay, I didn't see that coming. A lot of times you ask the question and you're pretty sure what the answer is going to be. And in that particular case, I was surprised that there did seem to be a lot of people that thought that New Jersey would use this regular season as a springboard into the playoffs. The idea that they're playing with house money, right? And they've got nothing to lose, and we're young and we're enthusiastic. It's like the Oilers of '83, I guess, the last year. When they kind of broke through, but before they ever won anything. And so we'll see. I mean, the series. When you think about travel.
There's none.
I mean, there is sometimes traffic on the turnpike.
Yeah, there might be traffic. Yeah.
But that's about it.
Yeah.
So I don't think either team is going to expend a lot of energy getting from
point A to point
B. Yeah.
So take me back to the West. If I thought somebody in the West was going to have their doors blown off, I thought it was Seattle.
Yeah.
But you mentioned Gordy. Now, there's a lot of pressure now being an expansion team after the Vegas Golden Knights, right? Now the Seattle makes it in their second year. They played well in those first 2 games against Colorado.
Really well. And they could have won them both, right? So again, those are the 2 series I've been following at Los Angeles and Edmonton and Seattle and Colorado. So I think Seattle completely caught Colorado by surprise in that first game. And then, the first period didn't look particularly good for Colorado, and then they got the 2 quick goals, but then it was a battle right to the end. And so I think Colorado, they started to play a bit more freely after they tied the game, and I think that they will relax a little bit to going into game 3. But yeah, so again, one of the column I wrote today looked at ice time there, and there's the big difference as near as I can see. Seattle plays the heck out of Larson. And I lost my train of thought. Larson and Dunn.
Dunn.
So Larson and Dunn play 24 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. So but their forward group, they only had 2 forwards over 19 minutes. That was Wenberg and Schwartz, who's also a Stanley Cup champion.
Yep.
And and they roll the 4 lines, and everybody gives them a little bit of something. And then you look at Colorado's makeup up front. So 5 guys over 19 minutes, McKinnon over 22. They have to play. JT Compher played 21 plus minutes the other night. They just do not have the depth. 6 of their forwards played under 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So they're really relying heavily on the top 6, and they're just trying to get by with the bottom 6. And that's a function of Gabe Landeskog not being healthy enough to play, and Kadri leaving.
Yeah.
Burakovsky's in Seattle now, not so the depth that they had isn't there. It doesn't mean they can't win, because McKinnon is just driving play, and Rantanen has been okay, but he's capable of taking it to another level. But the one thing that Seattle has that Colorado doesn't is depth up front. And boy, one injury to one of those key guys up front, and Colorado is going to be thin. So I that series feels like it's going to go for a while.
We could obviously go through all of them. I do want to move to the locals here in a bit, but any of the other series, anybody catching your eyes in any of the other series? I mean, it's 2 games. That's the part of this too. Like, the panic in Toronto after the first game, and
Well, yeah. So I was thinking about that.
Yeah.
You know, we do a thing called the concernometer and the panicometer, and you know, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's fun stuff.
Yeah.
But in all honesty, you know, you saw this in 2019. You know, Tampa was out in 4 games. You know, you know, like you can go from concern to panic very, very quickly, and you're not wrong, right? You know, like you know, New Jersey after this unbelievable regular season could be doing, you know, a locker clean out in you know 96 hours, and it's like, what just happened, right? So yeah, I mean, I'm entertained by the Florida-Boston series.
I am too.
Okay,
yeah.
So you know, that's the one that partly because, again, you're breaking this thing down, and so you sit there and you spend 10 minutes looking at the stats and considering all of the options, and I do like to look at what happened a year ago, especially if the teams are fundamentally the same teams, right? So a year ago, going into the playoffs, Florida was the President's Trophy winners, and the Boston Bruins were the wild card team. And so then you look at the teams and you say, okay, are they fundamentally different? Well, yeah, Matthew Tkachuk changes the you know the picture in Florida, but he's an elite player, and Huberdeau was an elite player, you know, and it's still important to have Barkov there, and it's still important to have Montour and Ekblad on the blue line, and they, you know, they relied on Bobrovsky last year, and they're going with that youngster Alex Lyon this year. So it's a little bit different, and Boston similarly, they have Krejci, they didn't have him last year, but you know, to me, it wasn't going to be a coronation. And I remember writing that. It's not a coronation. And the history of the National Hockey League is that these teams that go wire to wire, like Boston does, they use a lot of energy to get there. You know, it's just hard to maintain that consistent high level from the start of the year to the finish. And eventually, you know, you have a little bit of a lull or whatever. And you know, and I think that could be happening with Boston. But the other factor in Boston is you take Bergeron out of that lineup, and everything that just clicked into place, right? There's your first line, there's your second line, there's your third line, here's your support guy. It on paper, when Bergeron is at 1C, everything else flows naturally. You take 1C out of there, and it's like nothing fits. It's like one of those, you know, puzzles, you know, like all of a sudden you can't make those things fit properly. So, you know, and how much time is he going to miss? Hard to say. But I thought that Florida was a team that underperformed this year and is better than they are, and probably Boston is a team that overperformed and maybe isn't as good as 65 wins in 82 games implied. So I thought that was going to be an interesting series. My panel, every one of them said, you know, well, Florida's dangerous. None of them had the courage to pick Florida, and guess what? I wouldn't have either. But I thought they had a puncher's chance, and so far they've shown that they do.
They're not scared.
No,
they're not scared. Yeah. And it's, you know, good for Calgary fans if you want to watch. It might give you a little bit of flashback, but you know, young Ryan Lomberg.
Oh yeah,
or I guess he's not young anymore, but Ryan Lomberg. You know, that's why you bring these kids along, and you know, maybe you shouldn't choke the other guy, but he got under their skin.
He's a catalyst.
He's a catalyst.
He's a catalyst. Yeah. And Sam Bennett. I mean, what, you know, that has anyone mentioned playoff Sam Bennett on the air here in Calgary in the last?
Well,
no, that's probably not.
No. The only thing I want to say about that is you probably don't remember it, but every time you did Bob McCallum's podcast, I text you because it frustrates me because they never listen to you. They talk over you. And Bob was doing his whole rant about there's nobody out there, and you brought Sam Bennett up. Sam Bennett could be. This is the Sam Bennett that everybody likes. This is the Sam Bennett that the teams want. This is the Sam Bennett that's a difference maker.
Yeah, and the boy was good in game 2. So yeah, exactly. When I see him play like that, I'm sure, you know, we just comment on it. You know, can you imagine if you're his employer, you know, and you see what you can get from him in selective situations, and you think, if only we could get that out of him more consistently. What I mean, he was picked behind Draisaitl, one player behind Leon Draisaitl in the draft. And I think that there is so much more to him there, but the only thing that's lacking and has been lacking all the way along is consistency. And you know, at this stage of the game, are you going to get it? Maybe not, but I will tell you this: if you're a team that consistently feels it's going to be in the playoffs, to have someone that can raise the level of his game when it gets to the playoffs is a nice luxury to have.
I've always wondered about Sam Bennett, that if he wasn't a little bit of a victim of Bob Hartley's promotion machine. Because when Bob Hartley was coaching this team, there wasn't a lot going on real good, and you're trying to distract people. So can't wait to get Sam Bennett back. Oh, Sam Bennett looks good. Like, he was very rarely does a coach pump the tires of a young player like Bob Hartley did, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. I don't know. To me, development can be so inconsistent, and you have these little plateaus and then dips and plateaus and dips, and then eventually you either figure out the consistency of being an NHL player 82 games a year, which is hard to do, but the really good ones will give you 65 to 70. And if you can get that out of most of your team, then and you're a good team, you'll be in the playoffs. But you see it the other way too. You see players that tease you with their ability, and there are times when they'll show you in a game or in a stretch that they have above NHL level skill, and then all of a sudden, like, you don't notice them for 2 weeks, and that eventually you have to make an evaluation, and maybe somebody else needs to try and find the buttons on that player, because you can't push the right ones.
Monday, something happened that has not happened in the history of the Calgary Flames before, as Peter Marr pointed out. A general manager with offers to stay walked away from this team. Waited a couple hours, went to the Athletic. You wrote it, I read it, the whole thing, sat back in my chair, took a deep sigh, and said, I'm not insane. You and I see this exactly the same way. Can I ask you this? Were you surprised by what happened on Monday?
Well, I'm surprised. No, because if it had gone the other way, I wouldn't have been surprised at that either. I think that I think, again, first of all, the first clue is that, it was widely reported that Brad Treliving had an opportunity to sign an extension last summer and chose not to. And the idea was that, let's see how this year goes, and let's see where things are at. And then I think that that there was a lot of what do I want to do next involved in this decision. And I think that people have to understand that people in positions of prominence like Brad Treliving are no different than you and I, right? Nope. You get to a crossroads in your life. Like, I'm approaching one myself.
Sure.
Like, what do I do this summer? Do I retire? Do I stay on? I go back and forth. I change my mind every 24 hours. I don't know. I'm genuinely unsure about what my professional future is. And I think that was probably the case for Brad. He has opportunities outside of hockey if he wants them. I think he ideally would like to work in hockey again. I think that he works so hard, puts in so many hours. He just struck me as someone that was verging on burning out, and that's certainly the messaging from his very good friend Don Maloney, who's taking over as president of hockey operations, that he just needs a break. And I understand that. Especially when you think about the way the NHL season is structured, the one person who won in one of those managerial seats that wasn't able to take a breath this summer was Brad Treliving, because of all of the,
that's right.
There was the Gaudreau drama, and then there was the Tkachuk drama, and there was trying to sort out the trade, and then there was the recruiting of Nazem Kadri, and then all of a sudden they're at training camp, and now you're waiting for the puck to drop at the start of the season. So it takes a toll on people, and at some point I'm sure Brad will emerge and give us his version of why he chose to do what he did. But I'm texted with him, but I'm leaving him alone to just to sort out what he wants to do next, because I think that's what he needs to do. He needs to just exhale a little bit and go from there. So that's that part of the equation. Then the second part of the equation is, so now a very interesting job has opened up in the National Hockey League. And it didn't surprise me when Don Maloney revealed at that first press conference that he was hearing from people that he hadn't heard from in 15 years, because I like this, believe it or not, this is a very attractive position. It's a hockey team. If you're looking to become a general manager in the National Hockey League, it's hard sometimes to take over a team that has had a really great year. And then, where are you going to go? The only place you can go is down. I think the perception around the National Hockey League is that the Flames have quite a good team that underperformed, and that no matter what happens next year, it's going to be better. So that's an enviable position to be in. You're starting as a non-playoff team, albeit the the non-playoff team with the best record, and you have these pieces, and there is a potentially a path forward to be very good. Now, that path forward, I think, you have to decide what you're going to do with your coach, which is critical. I think if you are hiring a general manager, and if the decision is that we are retaining our coach, then the manager coming in has to know that he doesn't have completely free reign, because he has to find a way of working with Daryl Sutter. If the decision is made to move on from the coach, that gives any manager coming in a bit more flexibility to chart a path going forward. And then as a manager going forward, obviously the first thing you need to do is at least get a sense from the players that are 1 year out from UFA about why would they stay in Calgary? Like, what if you're Elias Lindholm, what will it take to get you to stay? If you're Mikhail Backlund, what will it take? If you're Noah Hannafin, what will it take? And I'm sure the answer through their representative is going to be, well, I want to see where things go. I want to see who's the coach. I want to see who are my teammates. Do we have a chance to win? If you can put together a roster that has a chance to be competitive, that potentially mirrors the 111 point team that they had 2 years ago, then I think that will entice players to stay. Let's face it, when you get to a certain point in your career, the money's probably going to be there. So now you have a chance and a choice to make the decisions about your future based on family and lifestyle, and the opportunity to win a Stanley Cup. And so as attractive as that job is, I think you really have to have a special set of skills to be able to do it. I think you have to be a people person. I think you have to have leadership skills. I think you have to create an environment that makes that makes the players and everybody involved in the organization feel included, feel like they have to say. Like, you want to have the ability to get out of bed in the morning and want to go to work. You just want to go to work, and that's why I think, again, no one's asked me, although I always volunteer my opinion anyway. I think Craig Conroy is the perfect guy. I mean, we've known him forever. I think he's checked every box. He was a popular teammate, and he demonstrated great leadership during all those years that they had, average teams with Jerome McGinley and Mika Kiprusoff. But he and Martin Gelinas were important parts on the ice, off the ice. Like, they just helped it. They were like, lubricating oil. They just helped the parts run more smoothly. And then the other thing I like about Craig Conroy is I think he's a hard worker, and I think he's climbed every rung of the ladder. The only thing that drives me crazy, and this isn't just in pro sports but in life, is that when sometimes people just jump and from here to there, and they don't climb those rungs, and they don't get the necessary experience. So they're not in the college rinks, and they're not in the junior rinks, and they're not in Russia at the international tournaments scouting players. They're just here's a really smart guy, let's give him the chance. And I think that Craig has put in his time. I think he's smart. I think he would be a great leader. I mean, I understand the idea that you cast your net further afield because you don't want to miss anybody, but I also hope that they don't overlook this very strong candidate in their own backyard who understands the nuances and the ins and outs of the organization, and I think is waiting for an opportunity. And I'll just share one more thought to you. So when Calgary first arrived here in 80-81, general manager was Cliff Fletcher. The assistant general manager was David Poile. I got to know David a little bit because he'd just sidle up to you in the press box and you tease each other back and forth. But when he got hired the job in Washington, I thought to myself, I don't know, I don't know. I thought after 2 years, I knew David pretty well, but, Cliff had this personality and charisma, and he was part of that, generation of general managers like Lou Nanne and Bill Torrey that just, we're kind of larger than life, and we're really running the National Hockey League. And David was more thoughtful and kind of quiet. And I thought, I don't know, does he have the leadership skills to do it? And then he went into Washington, and 2 weeks later, he makes this fabulous trade with the Montreal Canadiens that effectively turned the franchise around. And it's like, okay, I guess he does, and so I see a lot of similarities. I just see a lot of the qualities that Craig Conroy has in David Poile, who's, I think, he's won more games than any other general manager in the history of the game. So, Yeah, I guess if I were to hold up a sign, it would be vote for Craig.
Well, and I'm the same way. I went as far on Wednesdays, and even today I said it. Like, I don't ask me if Craig Conroy is right for the Flames. Ask me if the Flames are right for Craig Conroy.
Yeah, that could be.
You know, but it's also something that you mentioned in your column that has been mentioned more than I remember any other time that I've been covering this team. That's the influence of ownership.
Yeah.
Right. And that's another question, which is a question because we don't hear from Murray.
Right.
They don't talk, and it's not new. That's nothing new. That's just the way they operate. But we don't know his influence in all of this, right?
No. I mean, way back in the day when I was still covering the team for the Herald, Murray and I would have lunch, once a year, and it would always be the same. Like, he would be peppering me with questions for most of an hour, and then I would try to edge something in there, and he wouldn't tell me anything because that's just the way he operated. And then I sort of drifted out of covering a team day to day, and we stopped doing that. And then he became more influential in the ownership group. I do remember having I know because I've heard it from from him that he considered, and this was before they brought Daryl back, Daryl Sutter to be the best coach that they've ever had in the history of the organization. And I do think that, like Daryl demands a lot from his players, and that's how Murray runs his businesses. He demands a lot from his people. And so I think that, Murray sees a kindred spirit in Daryl Sutter. And I think that's why we can't answer these questions until we get a sense of, like, it feels like the owner is on side with the coach, and that the coach has a 2-year contract, and he's just going to stay on and continue to coach the team. But if that's the case, then a whole lot of other decisions might have to go in a different direction, because not everyone is going to necessarily want to come back and play for that coach. So yeah, it's difficult. The other thing I would say is that it's really hard to change, right? So when you think about, and then I'm as guilty of this as anybody, but we always evaluate on the basis of championships. So that's the only thing that matters. Even the teams that get to the Stanley Cup final, if you don't win, like, who remembers, like, what year was it that San Jose got to the final?
Exactly.
What year was it that
Nashville
got to the final? I mean, like, it gets blurred very quickly in history. And so, when I started covering the National Hockey League, there were 21 teams, 16 of them made the playoffs. Making the playoffs was considered a successful season. And once in a while, some of those really lousy teams would upset somebody along the way, and suddenly they're in so now it's 32 team league. 16 teams miss the playoffs. It's hard to make the playoffs. Good teams miss the playoffs. And so, but if it almost feels as if the model has to change, that if the only thing that matters is winning a Stanley Cup championship, do you need to have the ebb and flow of professional sport where you accept that you're going to be pretty terrible for a couple of years, and because you're pretty terrible for a couple of years, you get good young players hopefully into the system that can make a difference, and then you start to build up, and then you supplement those players with more experienced players, and then you reach a point where for a 5 to 7 year period, you have a chance to compete. Maybe you win, maybe you don't. But then at that point, you just can't keep hoping to turn 7 years into 10 years and 10 years into 12 and 12 into 15. It happened in the past because there were fewer teams, but it's just harder to do right now. I always say, do the math, 32 teams, 100 years in a century, so 3 championships per century, right? Not a lot. And so and yet the philosophy here has been, we have a chance, and we've got a good group, and so we're not taking a step back. We're going to patch and plug, and in patching and plugging, recently anyway, hasn't worked as a methodology for winning championships. Pittsburgh wins, Sidney Crosby. Washington wins, Alex Ovechkin, right? Tampa wins, Nikita Kucherov. And if Edmonton wins this year, Connor McDavid. Toronto, Austin Matthews. I mean, Calgary's got lots and lots of good players, but there isn't anyone that jumps off the page. And last year they had 2 that were close.
Very close.
Gaudreau, and they're not here anymore.
No.
So and like, yeah. Anyway, so it's a challenge, and I don't pretend to have the answers because it's so complex and complicated, and but I don't see how you can change the expectations of fans. I mean, fans want to,
they want to win.
They want Stanley Cup parades.
Yeah.
And so, if the goal, and again, John Bean and Don Maloney on Monday, the goal is to win a Stanley Cup championship. Well, if the goal is to win a Stanley Cup championship, and I put it this way, I wouldn't, at this stage of the game, with the money that you've got committed to Huberdeau, I would try and give this group one more year just to see where you're at. But at some point soon, you may have to make the decision that it didn't work out with this group, and you have to make a turn. And I don't think you're going to see it between now and June of 2024. But at some point soon after that, depending again on the result of the 2023-24 season, you might have to have that organizational day of reckoning that they've been putting off for a long time.
Never drafted higher than 4th.
Yeah. Sam Bennett
and Corey Stillman, right?
Yeah. Wasn't.
But it's of that vintage.
Yes, exactly.
I'm just going off the top of my head.
Yeah, I thought Stillman was a 6th, but you know what, Rob? I'm not remembering things as clearly as I once did.
No, but have never drafted first. And this is not a shot at Edmonton. I guess it is, but four first overalls in 6 years, right? In the lottery system.
Yeah.
And if again, the only thing that I really cringe at, because a lot of this stuff that was said on Monday was said by Jay Feaster before.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people are reporting this is some sort of revelation. But remember Feaster the year after they traded Ginla and Bouwmeester, he was on TSN saying, my job is to get this team to the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And they got a lot of heat for that. But I'm not allowed to say the R word. I'm not allowed to say rebuild. Oh, crap. Let's, that crap just drives me around the bend. People are pretty smart, savvy, right? You can't. That reminds me a bit of, we won't show home games on TV because nobody will come.
Well, I agree with you, because I do think that, I mean, hockey fans in Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Vancouver, Toronto, Ottawa are pretty sophisticated. Most people grew up playing the game or watching the game or having something to do with the game, or if they weren't doing it, somebody in the family was, and they kind of got drawn in. So you might be able to pull the wool over people's eyes in maybe less sophisticated markets, but it's hard to do in Canada.
I agree. Last one before you go. Just a thought, and I mentioned it as you came in. He's now the MVP. The last 4 years, he has been the top goalie in 2 different leagues every year. I'm not sure what is left for 22-year-old Dustin Wolf, who got a little taste at the end. But man, you've covered this team. I've covered this team. I don't remember a prospect for the Flames having kind of this much acclaim in his first 2 years in the AHL.
Not in the AHL. No, I was thinking Mike Vernon, the way his junior career evolved,
right.
And I covered him in junior, but I thought that when he got his chance, he would be a good goaltender.
Sure.
I think I can produce articles to prove that I was a big proponent of Mike Vernon coming through the ranks. But you're right. Other than Vernon, if you think about somebody that they drafted and developed internally, they've tried, a lot of times. But really, the other goaltender that made a huge impact here was Kiprusoff, who they traded for. And so you're right. It's hard to draft and develop goaltenders. Like Carey Price was a high draft choice, ended up having a great career. Marc-Andre Fleury, a high draft choice, ended up having a great career. If you can steal a guy in the 7th round and then have him be like in this very short period of time, a guy that appears to be on the cusp of being ready to play in the National Hockey League, then again, good on the scouting staff for doing that. But I agree with you. Well, there were times this season, and I'm sure this has come up on talk radio and on your show too, that when Markstrom was struggling, why not? Why not try Dustin Wolf? I mean, where's the dressing room? Like, it's
I know.
It's it's not like you're flying him in from Stockton anymore. He's right here, and it looks like you need a boost. But again, that comes down to an organizational philosophy, and the Flames, their season is on the line. They can't win the game in overtime. They can't win it in the shootout. They have good players, but they don't have a Trevor Zegras. They don't have, the two that they had were in the press box, right? Jacob Pelche and Matt Coronado were watching the game. There's a reason teams put young talent in the lineup. Again, it's a different era, right?
It is a different era.
In the old days of ties, it didn't matter. In the old days of 5 on 5 overtime, it didn't matter. But now it's 3 on 3 overtime. Now there's a shootout. There are points to be gained if you can excel in those situations. And when you don't excel in those situations, and then you look at the shootout record of the veteran players, I mean, Rob, I'm watching the thing and I'm thinking they're just going to shoot it right in the pads of the goaltender. There's you don't have any confidence that puck is going to go in, and you're going to see a little bit of razzle and dazzle that it fools a goaltender. And so, again, some of it, I'm often accused of being stuck in the old ways, but the one thing that I do recognize is that there is a place for young talent in the lineup all the time, because they grew up on shootouts. They grew up on 3 on 3 overtime. It's not new to them. They embrace it. There's a confidence bordering on cockiness for these guys that even when they're very new in the National Hockey League, well, you see, who did Nashville trot out? These
they were all first years.
They were all guys that they brought up from the minors because they traded away half their team and the other half was injured, and they got the job done. And so, is it second guessing? I mean, I'm watching the thing and I'm thinking this isn't going to work out. I don't think it is second guessing. So you have to show a willingness to, when a player appears to be ready, sometimes, and they probably take their lumps in the first little while, and you just have to live with that. You just have to live with the fact that a young player, who, especially, players who are, drafted, later in the first round, that aren't going to Connor McDavid or whatever. It'll take time, but if you have faith in your scouting staff, if you have faith enough in these players to sign them, you have to have faith enough to use them.
Appreciate this. When next we speak, I believe you're back on the road again in a couple weeks.
It's hard to say. Yeah, probably. I can't even keep track anymore, Rob. You know what? Honestly, this is terrible. I go day by day. I look at today's schedule. Okay, I'm doing Rob's podcast. I'm doing John Shannon's. I've got my notebook due. I've got to watch the games tonight. That's today. And
are you on Bob McCow's podcast?
You bet.
So when I go home for my run tonight, I'm listening to you.
You'll have to. But
is there new material?
No, I saved my A material for you.
Oh, wow. I go without saying. Okay, perfect.
No. For some reason, they've settled on Burnside and I as a hockey,
duo.
I guess so. I actually wish they'd use Morganti, but I guess because Bob at Morganti and I used to be on McCallum's show when it was on the radio, and that was really a lot of fun. So, but I like working with Scotty too. We work together at the Athletic, and he's a good friend. And the beauty of it, of course, is that John Shannon really knows the game, and Bob, he'll throw something out just to get our backs up, and then we'll seize on it and it'll work, and half an hour later,
the old why don't goalies play 82 games?
Well,
the argument
that one didn't come up today.
Okay, good. Anyway, thank you for doing this.
Okay,
we'll see you in a couple weeks.
All right, great. Thanks, Rob.
Eric Duhatschek from the Athletic joining us.